So in the first video lesson for the animal kingdom, we talked about the general characteristics that they look at to divide them into different phyla. And then we did an overview of the phyla that belong to the animal kingdom. We're only looking at 9. There's over 30. The first 8 are all invertebrates, and 2 of the subphyla for phylum Chordata are invertebrates, but we will also focus a little more on subphylum Vertebrata because that's the group to which we belong. So this video lesson is going to focus on the first few phyla, so from the sponges, so from phylum Porifera to the worms. So we're going to talk about the 3 groups of worms as well. And as we go through it, it would be a really good idea if you had your table out so you can kind of look as we go through and jot down some things to complete the table. So common name, a representative, things like that. Okay, and I'll help you with the first one. So the first phylum is the most primitive. Again, this section is focusing on the invertebrates, which include 95% of the animal kingdom. Okay, and those are all different examples. Invertebrates in general lack much for internal structures. Their reproduction may be sexual or asexual because a lot of them have an asexual means like budding or binary fission or regeneration. Some are coelomate, some are pseudocoelomate, and some are acoelomate. And they may be asymmetrical, radial, or bilateral in their symmetry. So we're going to take a closer look at each. These are the 8 phyla of invertebrates. So it's the same list as before, but without phylum Chordata. There are 2 subphyla in phylum Chordata that are invertebrates, so technically it could be listed here too. The first one is phylum Porifera. Okay, with each phylum, I'd like you to try and fill out the survey, so the column that belongs to that phylum. And these are some other questions that I'd like you to look at when you get into the arthropods. Okay, so you can go back to this later on. First phylum is phylum Porifera, and so its common name, it means pore-bearing, so the pore-bearing animals. Okay, so when you see Porifera, has lots of pores. The animals that have lots of pores or holes in them are sponges. So not the factory manufactured sponges that we buy to clean things, but the actual real sponges. So you could buy a loofah sponge, for instance, which actually came from the ocean. So now sponges are asymmetrical. We already kind of looked at a couple of examples. They can be all different shapes and colors, and they're really neat to look at. They have 2 germ layers, so you would say they're diploblastic, and they're acoelomate. So they have no body cavity. They have a very simple structure. They only have 2 germ layers, so they can't really differentiate as the organism becomes an adult. They don't really differentiate into very complicated cell structures or tissues. Okay, they don't really have true tissues, as we would call it. Their larvae are motile, but when they become an adult, then they are sessile, so that means they don't really move around. But because they have motile larvae, we do consider them still relatively motile animals. They reproduce sexually using external fertilization, so they release sperm and they release eggs and they meet out in the water, and by high numbers, then the chances are that they can have fertilization and make babies. But they also can reproduce by budding. So a little one will kind of grow off the side and then break off and fall to the ground and form another one. They have some really cool cells. They have collar cells. You can look at a book, or let me see. I'll bring one up right quick maybe. Okay, so these are collar cells. Here's one blown up. This is like the picture that's in your book. So these are collar cells, and they have little flagella that help to kind of cause a current so that they draw water in through their side pores, and then it goes out through the top. And so they kind of filter feed. The water comes in, they have little, they can take food into this part, into their collar cells, and then they have little cells called amoebocytes. Let's see if I can blow it up. Amoebocytes. That's not big enough. Okay, so the lighter blue ones that kind of go close by will pick up the nutrients, and then they'll move through and carry them to other cells. Okay, so they don't have complex tissue forms, they don't have a digestive system or anything like that. They have very simple structure. So amoebocytes and collar cells are some key terms that would be good to know for them. So, what do we know about them? Their common name, they're pore-bearing animals, or pore-bearing. Representatives are sponges. Their habitat, they're aquatic. Body symmetry, we said they are, you're right, asymmetric. And for the number of germ layers, there's 2. So we say diploblastic. They are acoelomate because they have no body cavity. Digestion, they have an incomplete tract. Basically, they are filter feeders. Okay, the water is drawn in through a current that goes in the collar cells. They don't even have a mouth. So they definitely don't have a mouth or anus. Reproduction, they reproduce using external fertilization, so they release their eggs and sperm, but they can also reproduce asexually by budding. Okay, some key terms. Filter feeders, amoebocytes, collar cells. That's probably pretty good for them. Let's see, did we miss anything? Nope. Okay, so that was the first phylum. It's really cool if you ever go scuba diving, like in the south. Really neat to see all the sponges. Second phylum is phylum Cnidaria, and the word means thistle, so their common name is often stinging-celled animals, or stinging-celled. So if you think of things that sting you, the easiest one to remember is the jellyfish. Okay, or you can also think of the sea anemone, which is, well, I can't even say it right, sea anemone, because that's Nemo's house, and you can remember his daddy telling him, you know, you gotta make sure that you help the sea anemone or you're gonna get stung. Okay, so they have tentacles with really cool little stingers on them we're going to talk about. In terms of symmetry, they are radially symmetric, or we call it radial symmetry. They have simple body forms, so they have only 2 germ layers. They're diploblastic, in other words. They are acoelomate as well, so they don't have a body cavity. They really have just the 2 layers of cells, an inner and outer, and then they have tentacles. They reproduce sexually by external fertilization, so they release their egg, and then they release their sperms, and they meet out in the meet out in the water. So high numbers, they produce high numbers so that they can increase chances that fertilization will happen. But they can also reproduce by budding. These organisms have 2 body forms in their life cycle. So if they're a jellyfish, at some point they would have been attached to the ground. So they would have been a polyp form. The jellyfish form that we think of, so that's a free floating or a free swimming body form with the tentacles underneath, is the Medusa form. polyp form is the sessile or non-motile form that gets stuck on the bottom and has the tentacles out the top, like the sea anemone. So the sea anemone is the polyp form, but when it's doing its reproduction, at some point there would be a medusa formed. On their tentacles, they have really neat little cells called cnidoblasts. Okay, let's see. Cnidoblasts. Oh, just need to see the whole thing. There we go. Okay, so they have cnidoblasts with nematocysts in them. So here's a cnidocyte or cnidoblast. And they have these nematocysts in them, and they are like a little harpoon. So they have a little thread and trigger, and they kind of shoot out and sting you. So they stick into the prey or stick into whatever has rubbed against it. And so here's the skin of their prey. They stick into them and they make them hurt. Okay, and sometimes it's strong enough that they can knock them out or even kill them. Let's see if there's any better pictures. Not really, not those ones. Okay, so that's kind of closer up. There's the cnidoblast, here's the nematocyst, and this is when it's inside, and this is when it's shot out like a little harpoon. So they're kind of cool. So they don't really think about or mean to hit you, but when you rub up against them, that is their defense mechanism. So they shoot little harpoons out at you. And there's some little video clips that we will watch, probably in class, but you can also watch on your own. I'll include them in Edmodo and also on the website. There was a trick. Okay. Now we're going to move into the worms. So there's 3 phyla of worms. The first are flat, the second group are round, and then the third group are segmented. So they're round, but they're also segmented. Okay, so the first group are the phylum Platyhelminthes, and we said platy, think flat, helminthes means worm. So they are common name flatworms. They are bilateral, so we can take a line, draw through it, and it makes it kind of cut in half. So two halves that are mirror images of each other. They are the first that are triploblastic. So they are the first to have 3 germ layers. That means they actually have systems, tissues, true tissues and systems. But they are still acoelomate. So they're called flat worms because they are flat, and while they have a digestive tract that goes through them, they have a mouth. Well, actually a pharynx for most of them. They do not have a body cavity. Okay, they're flat, so they don't really have space for it. They reproduce sexually, but they also reproduce asexually. Planarians can by binary fission. And some of them, like tapeworms, can, if they're hermaphrodites, some of them are hermaphrodites. So some are free living, like these guys. So these are flukes, and these are planarians. These live in the bottom of the water, and they have like a little pharynx that's used as a kind of like a little vacuum cleaner that they suck food in with. These have eye spots because they want to be away from light. So they feed on things on the bottom, so it kind of directs them away from the light and towards the bottom. This is a scolex. It's a specialized head region of a tapeworm, and if you blow it up, this is what it looks like. So it has these suckers and hooks so that it can really latch on the intestines of its host. So we can get a tapeworm, but so can other organisms. Can you imagine the size of a tapeworm that can come from a whale? If you look it up, it's pretty amazing. I think it's like hundreds of feet, but you have to look it up. So those are the flatworms. Phylum Nematoda. I'm going to let you complete the rest of the table. Try your best. Go back and look at the things if you need to, or review them, and then fill it in as best as you can. Okay, so now we're on to the roundworms. So phylum Nematoda. It means thread-like, but they are often called, or common name, are the roundworms. They are bilateral. Okay, so all the worms are bilateral. They are triploblastic. Okay, so everything from the flatworms up are triploblastic. So they have 3 germ layers and more complex body forms. These ones are the only pseudocoelomates. So they have a body cavity, but they don't have that special tissue that coats the organs. So they have a coating on the inner body wall, but they don't on the organs. So they are the only ones with a false body cavity. So a big star by them. They're also the first to have both a mouth and an anus. The first to have a complete digestive tract. Okay? They have, a lot of them are parasitic. A lot of the parasitic ones don't harm us, but there's some that can in certain cases. So, and some of them are kind of, their life cycle is a little gross to talk about. So, gross and interesting at the same time. So this is a pinworm, and pinworms are fairly common, especially in young children, because they are easily picked up at like daycares and easily transferred through sharing of things. So they lay their eggs around the person's anus, and they kind of come out at nighttime and they make them itchy. So unfortunately for little ones, they don't really know how to make sure they wash their hands all the time, and so it's really easy for them to reinfect themselves. This is Ascaris, and Ascaris, they have male and female Ascaris, and when they reproduce inside, say, a human host, then they lay like a couple 100,000 eggs. And so this is not as common. They don't usually have that many at a time, but sometimes they can, and they can block part of their intestine or some of the ducts as they pass through. So there's some kind of interesting video clips that we'll watch in class about some of these worms. This one was featured, the Gnathostoma was featured in, I think it was a Grey's Anatomy episode where the couple had gone to a foreign country and they were swimming in the water and they picked up a larva of the Gnathostoma. They don't tend to usually like humans, but as they're trying to find the host that they like, then they kind of burrow through the humans, and they're kind of cause a lot of pain as they do. Hookworm, the mouth, this is the mouth of the hookworm, they actually burrow in through a person's foot. So if you're not wearing proper footwear in a country where they might have hookworms, then they could burrow in through your foot or an animal's foot and then infect you, and it's very painful because they crawl through your muscles, and then you kind of cough them up into your mouth and then swallow them back down again and kind of reinfect yourself. So these are, a lot of them are parasitic. Some you'd never know that you even have them, but sometimes they can cause pain or difficulties. Okay. The third group of worms, so I will include video clips and we'll watch them probably in class. So make sure you watch them because they're interesting. The third group of worms are the segmented worms. So phylum Annelida, or the annelids. Annelid means ring. So they look like they have rings around them. They're segmented. They're the first to be segmented of all the organisms, and that means that they can kind of segment the body and have different parts in different sections of the body. They're bilateral. They are triploblastic. Again, they have 3 germ layers, so they can have a more complex body form. These are the first coelomates. So we see the transition through the worms. The flatworms were acoelomate. Everything below them are acoelomate. Okay, the nematodes, or the roundworms, are pseudocoelomates. They're the only pseudocoelomates. And then the earthworms and everything above them are coelomates. Okay, it indicates they're more complex. They have a true body cavity with the special tissue that surrounds and protects their organs. Their body is divided both on the outside and on the inside. And on the inside, they have walls of tissue. We've seen this word before, a septum or septa, plural. These ones are able to move using their hair-like bristles, so they kind of stretch themselves. They dig their hair-like bristles in, and then they pull themselves along. So they're called setae. And we're going to look at them in a little more detail whenever we do the dissection. So they include the earthworm, which we're going to dissect, the leeches, which are external parasites, okay, tube worms, and clamworms. These ones are fairly common down at the beach. Okay, so that is, let me see. So these ones were the first to have the complete digestive tract. They had a mouth and the anus. All the ones above them have a complete digestive tract. So even though it doesn't say it on here, they do. They have. This is the head of the organism. It's closer to this swollen region. So this is the head. Their mouth would be here, and their anus would be here. So they have a complete digestive tract too. Okay, so we're going to stop here for this video. Just from the sponges to the worms. We do a dissection of the worm, so we will look at it in more detail, the earthworm, and then we're going to study the rest of the phyla. We're going to try a different way by exploring each group having a different organism to explore and share about. So I will do a little video kind of like this, so you can go back and refer to it as an overview for everyone, but you'll each get to share about your phylum or particular group of animals. So again, if you have any questions anytime, ask. Mommy. That's what I'm here for.